Today we are going to meditate on the book of Samuel, the first book of Samuel, chapter 1, verse 1 onwards. So we are going to read from verse 1 onwards. There was a certain man from Ramathaim, Sephite, from the hill country of Ephraim, whose name was Elkanah, son of Jeroham, the son of Elihu, the son of Tohu, the son of Suf, and Ephraimite. He had two wives. One was called Hannah and one was called Peninnah. Peninnah had children, but Hannah had none. Year after year, this man went up to his town to worship and sacrifice to the Lord Almighty at Shiloh, where Hophni and Phinehas, the two sons of Eli, were high priests to the Lord. Whenever the day came for Elkanah to sacrifice, he would give portions of meat to his wife Peninnah and his children, but to Hannah he gave double portion because he loved her. And the Lord had closed her womb. Because the Lord had closed Hannah's womb, her rival kept provoking her in order to irritate her. This went on year after year. Whenever Hannah went up to the house of the Lord, her rival provoked her till she wept and would not eat. Her husband Elkanah said to her, Hannah, why are you weeping? Why don't you eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more than 10 sons to you? Once they finished eating and drinking in Shiloh, Hannah stood up. Now Eli was priest, sitting on his chair at the doorpost of the Lord's house. In her deep anguish, Hannah prayed to the Lord, weeping bitterly. And she made a vow, saying, Lord Almighty, if you will only look on your servant's misery and remember me, and not forget your servant, but give her a son, then I will bring him to the Lord all the days of his life, and no razor will be used on his head. As she kept praying to the Lord, Eli observed her mouth. Hannah was praying in her heart, and her lips were moving, but her voice was not heard. Eli thought she was drunken and said to her, How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine. Not so, my lord, Hannah replied. I am a woman who is deeply troubled. I have not been drinking wine or beer. I was pouring out my soul to the Lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying to the Lord out of great anguish and grief. Eli answered, Go in peace, and may the Lord God of Israel grant you what you ask him. She said, May your servant find favor in your eyes. Then she went her way and ate something, and her face was no longer downcast. Early next morning they arose and worshipped before the Lord, and then went back to their home at Ramah. Elkanah made love to his wife Hannah, and the Lord remembered her. So in the course of time Hannah became pregnant and gave birth to a son. She named him Samuel, saying, Because I asked of the Lord, and the Lord gave him. So for discussion, we have taken the above episode where we find a woman by the name Hannah, who was one of the wives of a man, Elkanah, who had two wives. The other wife was Peninnah, and she had children, whereas the main character of today's story, Hannah, she doesn't have children. And this was back like 1,000 years before Christ. So like we are in the 21st century now, so 3,000 plus years before 21st century. The first thing we see about Hannah, she had a very loving husband. I don't know whether her husband was fair, but to Hannah, he loved her more. And how do we know that Elkanah loved Hannah? Because from his own verse in 1 Samuel chapter 1 verse 8, from we read just now, we hear Hannah being told by her husband, Hannah, why are you weeping? Why do you not eat? Why are you downhearted? Don't I mean more to you than 10 sons? So we are talking about incident which took place 3,000 years before our 21st century. So even in this day, now Hannah was a barren woman. She was not conceiving. I think because her other wife Penina had many children, so they must have been married for a long time and didn't have children. Even in the 21st century, if you don't have children, women feel a bit downcast. They feel terrible in their heart, and socially they are not acceptable. And we know we live in the 21st century, whether you're in the Western world or in the Eastern world or in the Middle East, wherever you are, if you don't have children, it is a big problem. Uh, in my own case, after marriage, the following year, not for 2 years later, I became pregnant. But I got married when I was doing my degree course second year. So just before I had to go to the final year, I became pregnant. So this is what I thought in my mind. If I'm pregnant before the exams, I'll have a big belly, I have a big stomach, and I have to go to the college with a big stomach. So it's better to abort it, and maybe the child will come during my exams and I will not be able to write my exams. So I planned 10 months ahead, and together with my husband we decided we'll have an abortion, and the child was aborted. It was my first child. I'm not saying it lightly. I know it's a very grievous sin to do that, to abort a child, because as far as I know, I have no ability, or nobody in this world has the ability to create a human being. And God gave me this child, my first child, our first child, and because of the circumstances. And now I blame the circumstances because I tell in my heart that because I was studying and I don't want to have a child when I'm writing my final year exam, so I aborted the child. But then I had my second child. That's my first son, my son John. He was born 8 years after marriage. So during this gap, so this the second year I aborted my child, and then the next following 6 years I don't have children. So I know how a barren woman feels. Like, you feel very terrible inside. It's not because my husband nagged me or my parents or my in-laws nagged me. They knew I was studying, and when I finished studies, they knew I have to work, I have to find a good job, I have to be placed well in the society. So nobody asked me why aren't you pregnant. But in my heart, I thought, after all these years, I'm not becoming pregnant. Something is wrong with me. So I used to feel very, very down, like Hannah used to feel. She was very downcast. And there are some people whom I know, they look at you as if, oh, this woman is married 8 years. But even married 8 years, I married at the age of 20, and I was only 28 when I delivered my first son. But even then, in my heart, I felt very sad that I'm not becoming pregnant. I knew that most of the women, they become pregnant after getting married. Even I got pregnant after getting married, but due to my uh, lack of knowledge of God, I aborted that child. Now I am crying because I don't have children. Uh, and in today, if 21st century, you think that it's not a big problem not to have children. I have heard of many women being domestically abused just because just because they can't give birth to children. And sometimes it's because they don't give a male child, and sometimes some higher societies do that, and even if it's a boy or a girl, at least give birth. One of my aunt, she used to tell me that she also had the problem like me. She didn't have children for the first 8 years. So she used to tell me that one of her sister-in-law used to rebuke her so much that she came home and told her family um, that even if I could at least deliver a big cyst, that would have been better, because she keeps provoking me, saying that I don't have the ability to give birth. That means that woman, she came to such a state that she's, because her womb cannot make a child. So she thinks that at least if a cyst grows big, so big enough that she could deliver that. Okay, this is an extreme case. But I also have heard of even Christian pastors who, there was one Christian pastor whom a friend of mine knew, and he said that the pastor's wife gave birth to 3 children, and they were girls. And because when she gave birth to the fourth child, that was also a girl, this pastor took this wife and to the gas stove and burned her. That's a Christian pastor. So if a Christian can do that, and especially a person who calls himself a pastor can do that, you know how much the people in our society regard the women who give birth to boys and disregard the women who give birth to girls. But in the present social community, we have the options of adopting children. Those who don't have children and they want to have a family, they go and adopt children from the orphanage. That's a good option. But there's also this fertility center where women go, and I don't know. There may be genuine cases, but there are some clinics. I had a friend of mine who's a nurse, and now she's working in England. But before, she used to work in India. She said she worked in a clinic where they had a sperm bank, and when these families, they came there for this fertility for fertility reasons, for treatment. The doctors, what they did, they took a sperm from the sperm bank and injected into into the woman, and she became pregnant. But they tell the family that it is the husband's sperm. So it's like cheating. Next, we find another characteristic of Hannah. She, even though she was quite often provoked by Penina, her husband's other wife, we never see Hannah refuting the other woman. She had a rival living in her own house, but even though she cried and she refrained from eating, and her husband tried to coax her, saying that, "Am I not better than 10 sons?" She still, if a woman provokes you for not giving birth to children, you'll naturally feel very sad. But, and being the beloved wife of the husband, she is not that arrogant, or she is not that superior. She doesn't show a superior authority to the other wife just because her husband loves her the most. She keeps quiet. If you go to the book of James, the letter of James in the New Testament, chapter 1, verse 19 and 20, Paul says that, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to anger. Because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires." So we see this character which Paul wants from us in Hannah's life. Hannah, she used to listen to whatever this Penina told her, but she never back answered her or never refuted her. She never became angry. She became sad, but she never became angry. So in this episode, which we in the Old Testament, in the book of Samuel, the first book of Samuel, chapter 1, we see that Hannah is not, instead of becoming angry, she goes to God and prays to God to change her situation. She know the other woman is right when she says that Hannah is barren. But Hannah does not refute her even though she is the most beloved wife of their husband. So, to come back to our families, there may be, see, in Hannah's case, it is her, it is the wife of the, is the wife of her husband. But in our families, we don't have that situation because in the present situation, the men are not allowed to have more than one wife. So uh, we don't have a rival like that. But we always, but whom do we get angry with? Most of the times, the husband or the wife. The husband gets angry with the wife gets angry with the husband. That's what happened. Our rivals are our own spouses. For example, a woman or a man who works late. Some people work more than other people. Like for example, me, when I used to go to work, I used to work only in the time which is allotted for me. I never used to work extra, means like 5 minutes extra or 1 hour extra, because in the countries where I worked, engineers don't get overtime or technicians get overtime. So I never used to work overtime. Although even I didn't need to work overtime. But in case when you go for meetings and you come back late, we don't get overtime in England or USA or I worked in the Middle East, Dubai and Qatar. And they said engineers don't get overtime in the companies where I work. I don't know whether other companies used to give, but the technicians in my company used to get overtime. I never got overtime. So I used to work only for up to a lot of time. But some, like for example, my father, he used to work like till 8 and 9 in the evening. Um, I don't know whether he got overtime or not, but he worked, but I never worked like that. So when this spouse who works late after office hours come back home, what does the wife say? I'm sitting at home all day. You don't care about me. You don't take me out for outing. You don't take me to visit my family, and she keeps on nagging him. But the husband, from his good side, the company is the company for which he is working is paying him salary, so I should work for them with all my effort, with all my strength. That's what he thinks or she thinks. It can be the husband or the wife. And then even the wife comes back late, the husband says, why, see, I came back at 5 o'clock. What were you doing there till 8 o'clock? Why do you have to work? And they keep on nagging. So this is not the characteristic we find in the first book of Samuel, chapter 1. Hannah does not nag her husband saying that, see, because of your other wife, my life is miserable. She never tells that to her husband. Instead, she goes to God and tells God that I have a problem at home. So next we see Hannah praying in front of the Lord's temple. She's praying. She's praying. In those days, there was not a proper temple, but there was a place where people used to gather to give sacrifices, to sacrifice. So Hannah's family went to Shiloh to offer sacrifices. So it was there, and Eli was the high priest at that time, and she was sitting there and crying bitterly. And she cried bitterly. She made vows. So we'll come to that later. But now we'll see that how she is praying. She's crying and praying. I have an example for you. My husband, before he stopped his alcoholism, he used to live in Dubai with another roommate. So he tells me that this roommate, he was a believer, and This is how he used to pray. Every morning before he goes to work, my husband used to drink all night, and his workplace was like in the same building. His office was on the same building, so he just had to go like 5 minutes before that. So he wakes up very late. The other guy. Whereas the other guy, he had to go a long distance, like 1 hour journey to his office, so he used to wake up early. But he used to wake up even earlier to pray. He used to wake up and pray, and he used to cry. He used to keep a tissue box near him, and he cried for his roommate who was sleeping after taking alcohol all night. And my husband is saying he used to cry. He used to use his tissue and sneeze and cry, and he at least 10 to 20 tissue he need for 1 hour's prayer. He used to pray 1 hour. That friend of my husband. Yeah, maybe because of his prayer, my husband stopped his alcoholism and came to God. He was converted. The next characteristics we see about Hannah is she respects authority. Here we see that she is crying in the temple, and the high priest Eli thinks that she is drunk, and she rebukes her, saying, "Why are you drunk? Stop your wine." And he used some words like that, which are not good to hear. This is what he says. Eli says, "How long are you going to stay drunk? Put away your wine." So the Hannah replies to the high priest, saying, "Not so, my lord. Do not take your servant for a wicked woman. I have been praying here out of great anguish and grief." So she's telling this person. She does not refute to the high priest. She understands that this Eli is a high priest and he is a man in authority, and she's supposed to respect him. Maybe he misunderstood her. Even then, she does not rebuke back, but instead she says, I'm a person with great anguish and grief, so I was pouring out my heart to the Lord." She has no other place to go. Unlike most of us, um, um, instead of rebuking or refuting a spouse or the family members who keep on nagging you, it's always better to go back to the Lord and tell the Lord, "You have given me a spouse who's so bad. You have given me a mother-in-law, father-in-law who's very bad," and pray. I'm not saying that you shouldn't take action if you are a victim of domestic violence. I'm saying like small matters, like I said, like coming back late from work and things like that. This is something we can pray and get change. God can change the heart of the other people. So it's better to pray. But if your spouse is beating you, your father-in-law, mother-in-law is beating you, your sisters-in-law, your brothers-in-law are beating you, then this is something you should take action. And I don't recommend that the women should be very respectful to your husband who does not have the spine or the bones to resist his family when they provoke his wife. That husband is good for nothing. That's what I think. Husband, when you get married, you should protect your wife. That's what all wives expect. Under any circumstances, the wives expect their husband's love and their protection. It may be from your mother or from your father or from any other family members. Your wife should be protected by you. See, I got married when I was 20. My husband was only 22. Even when he was 22, he made sure that his family members did not rebuke me in any case. So looking at that time, I didn't understand that. But now when I hear so many families, these men who are in their late 20s or early 30s, they do not have the backbone to resist their families and protect their wives. But now I know that my elder son is 24 years old. So my husband was only 22, and even at 22, he made sure that his family did not provoke me in any way. uh, Even though he was not converted or he didn't believe in God, but that was one quality my husband had, which I only understood 30 years later. Okay, now coming back, Hannah also, she hoped that one day God will answer her prayers, and for that she gives the Lord, she gives vows. For example, God told Abraham that your wife Sarah will have a child this time next year. And we see in Genesis chapter 18, verse 12, when God says that she loves because she's old and she has crossed the childbearing age, so she thinks that she's not going to have a child, and she laughs. And and God even asked Sarah, why did you laugh? And then we have Rachel in chapter 25, Genesis chapter 25, where Rachel is wondering why the twins uh, in her stomach are quarreling with each other. And she asked, if everything is well, why am I like this? Why are my twins fighting inside the womb? So that was Rachel. Now, Hannah, even though there's no child and there's no hope, she fears God and she knows that God will answer her prayer. And even she gives a vow saying that I will let this child live in the temple of the Lord all his life. Now if you go to then I didn't read that. When you go further down, we see that Hannah keeps her promise. She takes the child, she goes back home, and then she becomes pregnant, and then she has a child. And when this child is 3 years old, she brings the child back to the temple and gives it to the high priest Eli, and the child remained there all the years of his life. The child grew there in the front of the Ark of the Covenant. The child slept in front of the Ark of the Covenant. And Eli looked after him very well, and he was. Later we see that Samuel grows up and becomes a judge for Israel. And he anointed two kings, Saul and King David. So he had his appointment was very good, and he worked very well as a judge and anointing two kings for the Israel community 1,000 years before Jesus came to earth. So what am I saying? I'm trying to say some qualities of Hannah, the mother of Samuel, the great judge of Israel, the mother of Samuel who anointed two kings, how he came into existence. Because Hannah, even though she was provoked by Peninnah, the other wife of her husband, she did not refute, or she prays hopefully, and gets the benefit from God, and as promised in her vows, she gives back this child to God. And you see that in 3 years, when the mother looked after the child, uh, the child grew up very well, and he served the Lord, and he was always righteous in front of the Lord. What am I trying to say is that women who are barren come to the Lord. Ask like me. I didn't have children for 8 years, and God gave me children. Not only one, He gave me 5 children. I'm so happy about it, and I have 5 wonderful children. So go back to the Lord, and God will answer your prayers. And if you have a loving husband like Elkanah, then be thankful to God, because there are so many husbands who, just because the wife is barren, and most cases we know that it is the man's problem that the women don't have children, and the man hide it even from their own parents, and let the wife get all the blame. And the wife, most of the wives accept this blame, and they walk in front of the community saying that it's their problem. Actually, it's the husband's problem. So be happy if you have a loving husband, and do not get angry with your husband when he comes back late from work. Maybe he is a type of person who likes to be working for the company he who pays him salary every month. But there are some people like me who work only 8 hours, not more than that, because my situation was like that. I had 5 children at home waiting for me, so I had to come back and look after their matters. Praise the Lord.